Everyone, welcome to the bar tonight. We've got an incredible show. Dr. Coghill is here. We're going to talk about the plight of trading health for wealth and all of the insight behind musculoskeletal injuries. Let's do it. Dr. Coghill, welcome back to the bar, my man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
Man, I can't wait for this one. I'm so pumped. But we've got to jump right into it because my drink is so incredible. I have to talk to you about it. But hit me with, what are you drinking tonight?
So I just went back to Old Reliable. I got the Old Fashioned. I will be honest. The reason why I went back to the Old Fashioned is because the old Granddad Bonded was just so bad that I have to hide it behind something. So went back to the Old Fashioned to hide it. So
did you actually put Old Fashioned Bonded in the cup?
Yeah.
That's the bourbon in there? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I apologize for you.
That's what I'm saying. I had to hide it. I was like, I got to get rid of it somehow. It's going in the Old Fashioned.
Choose the 114 or don't even bother. Yeah. Otherwise, pick a different family.
Wise words. Wise words right there.
Got to do it. Man, this was the second biggest hit at our holiday party. This is the Buddy the Elf drink. Ooh. It is incredible. We are now holding hostage the recipe and what's in it. Hit that on TikTok or Instagram stories. You can see how we made the drink. You can see Mallory's incredible handwork on pouring it. I mean, the lighting's incredible. It is one of the most fun parts of the show is making the drinks, having that great night together. And it's just way more fun than you think it would be.
Let me just ask, where do you guys get the drinks? Because you guys' recipe book is okay. Yep, fair.
Secrets, bro. Secrets. Can't do it. I will say Cassie is the master of that, and she puts in not minutes, she puts in hours. But it's worth it. Every single time it's worth it. Can't believe it. And this has been way less punishment than last season. Last season, there was a ton of punishment in there. And they haven't surprised me yet. But remember, we have a 2-week hiatus coming up because Christmas, New Year's, and then we come back with a packed lineup as well. But the key thing is when we get back, I'm afraid there's going to be a couple in there that are stinkers. That'll be a little tough.
Yeah. Not to tangent, but the eggnog. What is your thoughts on eggnog?
Eggnog's not my drink. I'm not in. It's too thick, too creamy. Save the calories for ham or, really sweet potatoes. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
You'll love this one. We found an almond eggnog at Aldi, and I was like not into it, but my wife loves it. So
yeah,
everybody out there.
So there's no dairy at all? No dairy?
None. Zero.
Yeah. That's what makes it harder. I couldn't do it. I don't know. Maybe. But the reason we have a great drink every single week on the show is because we like to do a cheers to charity. So our cheers to charity today, Dr. Coghill, talk about the charity that you'll be sponsoring tonight.
Yeah, tis the season. I think it's a really good time of year to kind of focus back on giving back to the city that, and having those blessings and being able to give back to people. So Nashville Rescue Mission does a lot for Nashville and being able to help people out with shelter, with food. And it's the season to kind of say, hey, it's my turn to give back a little bit. I've been blessed. So kind of hit home with me this year. People want to call me the Grinch, but I feel like this is the reason for the season and helping give back to those less fortunate. So Nashville Rescue Mission.
I feel like Cassie at the office, when she dropped the DMX Christmas, it really got you in the mood. And that was the day after Thanksgiving. So I don't think the Grinch thing holds up this year. Last year, all right. But now I think we broke you early. I think we did.
I don't know what it is. I do love it. I love it, but I'm just waiting. I've watched The Grinch now a couple times. I'm just waiting for that Whoville moment of we've lost everything, but it doesn't matter. We're all here together. That's what I want. That's what I strive for. I don't like a lot of the other foo-foo stuff, but it's that
I definitely think that's the post-COVID Christmas. I think you just explained 2021. But anyway, we'll move on from there. I think one thing that is always just fun to talk about, and when we have you on, we can just highlight how much fun we have at Active Spine and Joint Center and how much the team comes together to put everyone's interest first and how much is sacrificed to make sure people are getting the best care possible. I really wanted to talk tonight about several things, but you really highlighted a lot of the things that are super important this time of year that really get brought up. And the concept of trading health for wealth is something that is a buzz term or a buzz phrase that's popped up over the last 20 or so years, comes in sparingly, but man, does it hit home certain times a year more than others.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that's unique and fun about patient care is it's a service oriented field, but something about it is that every few months, it's pretty much a whole new turnover of new cases, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it seems like this time of year, this year specifically, we've seen a whole lot of people that have sacrificed their health a ton, and then now it's starting to catch up with them. What have you felt like?
Yeah, it's just this time of year has always been really hard, right? You come off summer, you're feeling good, but then you get the time change and that's a stink. You get the weather change and that's a stink. And then just the dreaded like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, it just you never get to kind of spin the wheels in the right direction between those. Yeah. So it's like that plus let's just say the 2020 that everyone's had, it's like a lot of people are kind of feeling those real lows of life. So right now it is like, man, hopefully tonight will just be a good motivation for people to jump back on it and understand that the time is now. We're literally losing the second. So let's get back after it.
I think that's the hardest part for people to wrap their head around as well. It's just that there's so much going on. There's so much busyness, and that we go through every decade. You can almost look at your life and see what things are a priority. There was a really funny meme from last week that went around, and it was talking about in your early 20s, how at any moment you could have 10 buddies over at your house in a non-COVID world. But by the time you get to mid 30s, it takes 2 months to plan an outing to get together with buddies at all. And I think that's so true because of what happens when you have kids. And then now you start sacrificing everything for your kids. So you start putting yourself to the back burner, but there's got to be some leveling out at some point where you start to shift from, all right, I've given them everything, but then I've realized I'm actually not being my best self because I feel like shit. That's the hardest part, I think, for most people. And I think a couple of the ways to start to highlight that, or at least to wrap our head around it. And I really am interested in people's questions about this. You know, we've got a lot of viewers right now. And one thing that I think is important is to understand is that we're here to answer your questions, and we can pivot the topics really well to examples and specific questions that connect with you. And our bias is always to get really nerdy about the subject and get really medicalized, but I don't think there's a whole lot of value there. But I do think sometimes we do need to step back and digest some of the research and say, okay, well, what are we even talking about? Because so often we think of, oh, I just have this pain, and now I've had this hip pain for 8 or 9 months. Well, that's just kind of my life now. I'm just the guy that has hip pain. And I think that is such a fallacy that people don't understand. And that's why we always appreciate teaching people our pain scale. And it's that really that mindfulness and awareness of what your body's supposed to feel like. So doing a body scan. So our favorite way to do that is to say, just think about your earlobe. When you think about your earlobe, how many times a day is that bringing awareness in your life? Are you thinking about it? Is it bringing your attention? And now let's compare that to every body part. Let's think about your left shoulder. Think about your right shoulder and bring that all the way down through the spine, through the hip, through the ankles, through the knees. Where is your attention getting drawn to frequently? And some of that might be a story you tell yourself, or culturally, you know, there's certain reasons that you'll interpret certain ways. But the problem is when we deal with these issues for so long, especially in a COVID-like world where forever we've been, you know, rightfully so, depending on who's in your household, et cetera, that you've needed to stay home, stay away. But now you've sacrificed a little too long. Pain's been very consistent, very persistent. And now you've gotten to the point where it's there all the time and you're telling yourself that that's just normal. But that's very much like having your smoke alarm go off in your house all the time. It's fine when the house isn't actually burning down. But now when we actually have a real injury or something that could be worse, that could be preventable, you're going to start missing those signals. And that's what makes it really tough.
Yeah, it's just a bummer because, yeah, they just somehow, you get the cloudiness of life and the busyness of life. And yeah, you slowly start making your life smaller and smaller and smaller. And then by the end of it, you know, you're a year down the road and you're like, oh, this is just my life. So it's like, I think bringing that awareness is a big step. Finally admitting to yourself, like, hey, I probably need to go get some help, going out to local chiropractor, physical therapist, whatever. It's just trying to reach out and say, hey, how can I make this better? Because there is always time to make it better. So I think that's a big message of like, stop for a second, pause, I think a lot of people, they carry the momentum of life with them instead of just saying, pause for a second. Wait, how can I change this? How can we get better? Where am I trying to go? And then taking the right steps to be there. So it can be hard because the busyness life is crazy, but at the same time, it's like, you just got to pause it for a second. Yeah. Tap back into yourself. It's kind of a little cliche. It's like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And you talk about your kids and stuff. And it's like, I think your kids will, in the long run, eventually respect the fact that you took care of yourself and you're out there kicking butt. Like, they don't want to get to you when you're 70 and you're broken down and hurting. And it's like, no, pause for a second. Like, take care of yourself, fill your own cup up, and then you'll be able to pour into your own. Like, don't accept the hurting, don't accept the pain. That you can always be better. You can always be a little stronger, a little more flexible, all those things.
I think that's if we step back and do the 30,000 foot view of exactly what you just said, it does in some way come down to just the culture of healthcare in general, that we are naturally reactionary. Ow, I'm hurt. Now let me seek situation X, Y, or Z. The only things I can think of that have really transcended this, I think the dental model has started to transcend it over the last 20 years. People are start to get the idea of preventative care for their teeth, that it really sucks to have a root canal and have to get a crown and pay $3,000. I think we've gotten to that point. So check and try to catch a cavity early. So regular checks make sense to people. People in their 50s, physicals with their primary care has resonated with them. We see the culture the stats are pretty good on that. But what people miss all the time is having a standard, regular muscle, joint, nerve, tendon exam. And what do we mean by that? We need to make sure that your whole body is functioning at some level that is, we can predictably say, is not trending the wrong direction. The same way the dental model would look at the teeth, we have that for movement, and it's one of the best kept secrets in healthcare. But I think that's a problem with healthcare in general, is that when you walk into a musculoskeletal care provider, it's the Wild West. It could be you walk in and you get x-rayed every single thing in your body, or you get massive imaging right away, to who knows what you get on the other side, where there's just a bunch of nothing that happens, or some weird thing with no evidence behind it. Or you could get an incredible workup that tells you every part of your body. I mean, one of the famous quotes from one of our mentors, Gray Cook, is that it's this idea that we now understand how the body functions to a really high degree, to the point that we understand that the body is this alternating reality of one area that's supposed to move really well in multiple directions, and the next one is supposed to be able to prevent motion and be able to be very stable and controlled. And it's this alternating sequence. And if at any time that pattern gets broken, something weird's probably going to happen, or something painful down the road. And so depending on that structure, we know how the body's supposed to function. We can test that, but then we have all of these requirements for life, the physical requirements for life. And I'm going to bring that picture up right now. And one of the cool things that we can do now with the new format of the show for season 2 is we are able to still be on camera, have this in-depth conversation, but everyone else can still see the image below, which is the physical requirements for life. And this is something I don't think gets talked about well enough at all. And it's when people come in and have an injury, it seems like they're blown away sometimes on how the hell did this happen to me? They seem like it literally came out of nowhere. And I think that's where we have this non-linear rate of decline that we talked about with Dr. David Seaman last week, that really blindsides people. They don't realize that if they're not treating all of the areas of life, if they're not treating all 6 physical capacities, that if they have a spike in activity that occurs from life, they're prone to tripping something off that's going to be painful. And then to what severity, we just really don't know. People most of the time think of acute trauma, right? That's the biggest issue. People get that, all right? I got hit by St. Bernard, or I was skating and a kid rammed into my knee and I heard a pop. We get acute issues. We don't get the overuse. Why do you think that people struggle so much with the idea of overuse injuries?
Yeah, I think it's because they compare themselves to what they used to be. Now the problem is that timeline of comparison just isn't realistic. It's like, hey, here I am in my 50s. I've raised children. I've, worked a hard job where I'm going, 9 to 5. I get home, I'm really tired. Well, dang, back in college, dude, I used to squat 365 pounds. Oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, they get a blip in their head one day and they're like, you know what? I think I'm going to get back in the gym. I used to love to squat. Well, dang, I used to do 365 pounds. So let me just start out with a good 285, be conservative a little bit. They get a week or two into that and it's zero sustainable. Just for whatever reason that life has sucked them into that hole of, not realizing how much time has passed. And I think that's there's so many things that pop in my head immediately what I feel like people could get benefit from, but people are blown away like, hey, I just took off a month of exercise. And it's like, taking off a month of exercise you're pretty, not that you're back to square one, obviously, but it's like, you might have some of the better research numbers in your head where it's like, you're losing 25% of your capacity, even just a month off. So if you let that go over a year, 2 years, even a decade, it's like that reality of where they're at is just so far off. I think it's a big thing.
I think so too. And I think when we think the extreme example of exactly what you just said is that there's some good evidence that if we just have 10 days of bed rest, that we get enough mitochondrial death. So think of the energy producers in the muscles that it takes 6 weeks to recover from. So meaning literally just 10 days of nothing, our body responds in such a negative way because we are made to move. The physical requirements of life are necessary. They're requirements. They're not optional. And the hard part is I was talking to a young athlete this week about it because a young athlete had a bad thigh tear, and we've now successfully rehabilitated them. They are stronger than they've ever been, running harder than they've ever been. And we were talking at the discharge because they were like, okay, well, now my concern is that my trainer at school or my coach won't be able to transition me back to on the field because now I'm stronger, I'm faster than I've been. But you know what? When we play sports, there's a lot of things that come into it. We think inner ear and balance and vestibular, meaning I have to turn my head a whole lot. It's not just straight line running or jumping or cutting. It's now doing that while there's an object or a ball in play that I have to respond to. So it's a lot of reactionary time that's really quick. So I need to now build back up. And like you said, a month off is a really long time. Multiple weeks means that we need to now come back following at least something close to that, what we call the 10% rule, which means your first time back, you need to go back at about 50%. And then each workout or each week, you need to start progressing at 10% more. And that could be any metric. That could be time, that could be intensity, that could be number of pounds moved. But ego-wise, that's really hard for a lot of people, right? It's that inner self of here's where I'm at, here's who I am, but they don't realize that the body may or may not respond as well or as fast as they would like it to. So it's crucial that they at least have that idea of I need that graded return. But I was talking to this young athlete and her dad, and I was saying, look, at the end of the day, when we think about the hierarchy of needs of the body's subconscious at the deepest levels really cares about three things. Does it have safety and shelter? If it has that. If it has food, and at some point is going to be able to procreate to keep the race going, those are the three biggest things the body biases. Everything else is about efficiency and minimal effort. So getting back to sport, that's a quality of life activity. That's something that your body, that we want to do because it's fun and it makes life incredible. So we love that. Let's go do sport, and there's a million other benefits, but deep down, the body doesn't want to be ready for that. So if we jump right into it and do what we naturally want to do, what's going to happen? It's that we're going to be exposed for potential injury because we're not ready. Our body isn't adapted to that. So to your point, get back on a graded approach. So we've got to get in there and put our ego aside a little bit. Let's go at it for half effort, see how it goes, and then now grade it up from there. And that's where it gets really important to understand that that's how we've got to handle that. It's just one step at a time. And same way you eat an elephant is the principle of life.
My favorite.
It's the same way with finances, etc. But man, is that hard to digest every day that goes by in the human experience.
Man, I tell you, I think that hits home for a lot of people. And what I've seen in clinic thus far, it's like, okay, I used to squat 365, and here I am 20 years down the road. I'm overweight. I haven't exercised a day in my life. Well, since I can't squat 365 because I used to, I'm just not doing anything. It's like, whoa, Ethan, you want me to do a TRX bodyweight squat? Come on, I'm not wasting my time with that. It's like, whoa, we're on this different page here. Like, I want you to get you back to squatting 365 pounds, but it's like, you're not there, brother. You're at the ground level.
Yeah.
We got to build you up appropriately. So you talking about the ego, I think is a big thing. And it's like, no matter what, we just all fall in life. And I think that's where that momentum comes in. And it's just like, hey, pausing, realizing for a second, like, hey, this is where I'm at. Where do I want to be? What are the appropriate steps to get there? And sometimes that can get a little, hard to digest with the ego, but I just think that's the safest place to start. And that's where hopefully you could find someone like Active Spine and Joint Center, or just some other medical provider to step in and help you get there. Because we all didn't dedicate, 7 years of postgraduate work to learn and know all these things. And we don't expect you to, but we just want you to come with an open mind, ready to go. So I think that's a big thing for me is hitting that ego of like, well, here's where I want to be, here where I was, but this is where I'm at now. How do I get there?
Yeah. I think that still comes back down to, at the end of the day, you really have to surround yourself with a medical team, a financial team, you name it, a mechanic. You have to have all the different trades, all the aspects, somebody deep down you can truly trust, to where you can give up that piece of it, to where not that you just lose responsibility, but you have to be able to trust someone else to have your best interest in heart. I think the easiest way to put that is medical providers, it's so much easier to appreciate how someone's doing in snapshots. So having done this now for 11 years and seen so many people that, man, it's been 8 years or 6 years or 3 years since we've seen them, we can easily plot how they were last time versus how they're doing today. And because of one of the exams we do it on video. So we do a movement video assessment. And we were able to then see, well, here's how you were moving 7 years ago. What the heck's happening now? I mean, we had that happen with someone that had an incredible squat, had great ankles, great knees, great hips, was in a bad car accident. And then afterwards, even after, they'd been through the best surgeries by the best surgeons, we'd done the best post-op rehab to get them better, their squat was still missing 80% of the range that they used to have. Now that's because of a actual broken bone surgery that they did their best, but it just didn't get them where they wanted to be. In that situation, we know how they were, we know how they are now, and now we can cope with that a little bit better, or we can understand like, well, now because of that accident, that person's going to then have to handle that situation differently and understand their current situation, but how can they train around it and what can they do to strengthen it and be their best? But the coping piece is big, and I think it's hard for a lot of people. I wanted your take on this. People don't understand what it takes to strengthen and to actually stimulate the healing process when they're stuck in that rut. I think that's what it comes back to, is they think they're jumping ahead to where, okay, well, in my first visit of rehab, I'm expecting this to be like my last day of rehab. I think that's the hardest part for certain people, certain populations to understand, is that, oh, so this is what I'm going to do every time. What I'm doing day one is what I'm going to do every time. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I always try to set that basis a little bit on day one and day two. It's just like, just give me the time. Like, I mean, if we are, I'd already said, like, we're already behind schedule. Like we're losing seconds by the moment. So it's like, it's time to go. But at the same time, like, if it was easy to gain strength as in one session, we'd all be walking around flexing like Arnold, like it'd be like, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But just the unfortunate reality is, it's going to take a minimum of 3 to 4 months of good, solid training, tearing that stuff up to build, or tearing that stuff down to build it up to really make some of those changes. I mean, it just takes time to set that baseline of where we need to be. And I don't know where the disconnected knowledge exactly is at, because like I said, not everyone dedicates their life to this type of research, and then they're hearing all these different facts. So I think that's another thing we could talk about. But the day oneers that want their whole life changed in day one is a hard one.
I know. Yeah, I think it goes back a lot to some certain providers, I think, accidentally put that vibe out, right? So they will remember in school, they were learning off of 22-year-old healthy individuals, and then assuming that everybody's going to get better in one treatment. And I think that's where you got to step back and say, who is the population we're dealing with? What are our real goals? And then you build the plan backwards. I think that's something that's always been great working with you and watching you how you meticulously go through building someone's plan to get better. When you see them day one, talk us through that just a little bit. What all goes through your head when you day one, you did an evaluation. Someone wants to get back to exercise. They haven't done it in years. It's been maybe 15 years. They now have knee pain. They're scared to exercise. They're not eating their best. They feel crummy overall. They've just dedicated everything to their kids. But financially, by trading their health for wealth for that time, it's time to finally get it back. In that context, what really goes through your head in getting them started on building that plan to get them back to exercise? What are some of the things that go through your head and it's part of that process?
Yeah, I think that's where our system comes into play, and something that I'm so fortunate enough to step into, where before I even meet that person, I get to look at those cool movement videos before I even walk into the door to see how they move. And just with the trained eye, you automatically get to know, like, ooh, this person's real far away from where they want to be, just depending on how can they bend over and touch their toes, how can they lean back, how can they squat. It's like it becomes pretty obvious, like, ooh, we got some things to do. So from step one, it's like, hey, I get to see how you move. That's going to give me a decent gauge of like, oh, you got some good mobility, your foundation's there. We check out the balance, one of the 6 requirements for life. How the heck's that doing? And it's like, if that's way far off, then I know I got some work to do. Then I know I can immediately step through that door and be like, hey, listen, I know where you want to be, but let's just set expectations that, you may be a little further than down. Some people are realistic about it, where they're like, yeah, I know I haven't got off the couch in years. Let's do this thing. And then I'm excited and it's like, awesome. Then we're just hitting the ground running. And then some people, it's like, wait, what do you mean? And you just have to explain kind of those bits and pieces to them. So it's between the movement assessment and then just the paperwork, like, hey, is it that acute injury or is it that overuse injury? Did you, have the St. Bernard run into your leg, or did you just try to jump right back into it? And then walking in, and I think one of the biggest questions that, you've trained me to ask them is like, what are your goals? What do you want to get back to? And sometimes that always isn't, a clear answer to people. You kind of have to understand what they're saying. So between like asking them where they want to be, the movements, and then just what exactly brought them in. They most likely didn't come in for no reason. Like, oh, hey, I'm feeling good. I thought I'd just stop by. You guys look like you got a nice office. It's never that thing. They're in here for a reason. And we always have to kind of to play that game of like, okay, where are you at? Where do you want to be? So those 3 things before I even walk in the door are pretty good.
Yeah. When you think of a toe touch exam, you brought that up a second ago in a movement assessment, because I really want to break down the physical requirements for life coming up here in a minute. But when you think of a toe touch, why is someone touching their toes valuable at all?
Yeah. I mean, that I would say, because life is bending over, reaching backwards. At some point in your life, you're going to have to bend over, pick up a kid off the ground. You're going to have to pick up a box off the ground. You're going to drop a pencil, bend over. And it's like, if you first don't, load through the hamstrings really good, evenly load the spine really good, you're going to overwork something, or you're going to compensate. It's people's favorite word. You're going to compensate somewhere, and eventually that's going to wear out. Obviously, most likely you're not going to feel it on the first time you compensate. But also then year by year, if you're not working, exploring those ranges of motion, it's slowly going to get shut down even more. You're going to stress passive structures even more, like the tendons, the ligaments, the joints. And then that's how you get in here to our office going, what the heck happened? I've been feeling good for 5 years. And it's like, well, dang it, Mary, dang it, Bob. For the past 5 years, you've slowly lost that range of motion. You've slowly lost that strength. And then now here you are with this, like, just mind-blowing, like, I don't get it. Just one day I bent over to pick up a pencil, pop, there went my back. And it's like, really, I wish you might have had some of the education that we wish you'd had, that hopefully, we're pushing forward in the profession of being able to be a little more preventative, to say like, hey, if you can't bend over and touch your toes, that's a huge disadvantage for life. Life is bending forward, getting stuff off the ground. Life is squatting down, picking up heavy weights, bending, twisting. And it's like the second any of that starts to close down, you're automatically putting things under stress. You're automatically setting yourself up to be a little higher risk for the injuries and just living a little smaller life than you'd want to be.
I think that's the biggest point you could have made. And another way to say it is that you'd have this direct, like, this is my direct cause of my issue, is always the what's hurting. Right. But the what's hurting, when people show up in the clinic, to us medically, it's like, that's the easiest thing to diagnose, right? I hurt right here and here's what happened. It's like, okay, but you probably 80% of the time you Googled that and you know what that part is. The hard part for people to understand is directly where they hurt very rarely is the actual thing that needs to get better. Yes, it needs to heal, but there's some timeline that's appropriate if you leave it the heck alone, that part will still get better. It's just when the calendar's short that we need to rush the healing there. And that's where we talk about our class 4 laser or using dry needling or some of these other principles, blood flow restriction, all these other cool modalities that we have. But the real thing is the indirect thing, right? It's the what is it that's making you overuse that area repeatedly? And that's what we're going to pick up on the exam 99 times out of 100. That's where Blair, that's where Mallory are going to record the exam. They're going to break out that exam. We know that answer before we walk into the room half the time of, all right, well, here's where we really actually need to fix things. And I really wish we met you a year ago and saw these and fixed them. Same way the dentist wishes that they saw you, picked up that cavity before it came a root canal. But that comes back to the cultural thing where every minute in our mind, we're thinking about how can we maximize our wealth situation and not focus on our health so that if we do this thing right, we never get there to the bad orthopedic outcomes or get to these bad situations. Heck, if we could just see people way earlier, I mean, that's where we're hoping that this becomes a standard of 4 or 5 wellness visits a year for people. But what does a real wellness visit come down to? And that's where I want your take. When you think of a true wellness visit, what would that be? And what would a wellness visit even mean?
Yeah. That's a great question. You put me on the spot. This is awesome. But I think it would start with some of those basic movements of life. Like what are those foundation movements? And I think that's where we fall back so easily on the SFMA. Those are just fancy acronym for a great company, great people that got together and said, what are the requirements for life? And it's just by those movements. It's like, how close are you? Are you sort of close? You like medium-sized close? Are you really far off? And I think that's a great foundation to be like, hey, yeah, we can judge you exactly where you're at. The other part would be just strength-wise. It still blows my mind to ask people to do a single leg calf raise, and they get 2 single leg calf raises in, and they're looking at me like, wait, I have to do more? And it's like, whoa, hold on. You realize like 20 plus, 25, 30 is like what the requirement is at. So between how you move and the strength would be a good thing. And then just to ask, I think is another good thing. It's like, what has been, if you do the ear test, what would be a spot that would be a little more sensitive to you, and then be able to get on that and stay ahead of it, because it's going to be somewhere on somebody, for everybody. Like, oh, hey, I got a little back thing or a little neck thing that I've been slowly okay with hurting. But it's like, if we're able to, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times a year, ask somebody like, hey, how's that thing doing? Or where are you at with it? Then we could get ahead of it and stay ahead of it.
Always,
so between the movement and then the strength, and just asking them like, hey, how is life going? What are you overusing? What seems to be hurting a little bit? Then we could, be a little more individualized with like being able to help them out with their musculoskeletal issues. It's just so easy for a dentist and look in the mirror and see a crooked tooth. Everybody smiles, so everyone easily can point out like, oh crap, my tooth is starting to get a little messed up here. But the body is so good at compensating. The body is so good at just, hey, a pin's on the ground, I'm going to go pick it up. It's not thinking, oh, well, my hamstrings were feeling a little tight there, or my hips were feeling a little tight there. So that's where people fall in this hole of slowly over time just, ooh, I had this, big old aquarium. Now I'm swimming around in a fish tank. What the heck happened? Our body's so good at compensating. So that's where I feel like in the musculoskeletal realm, it gets a little hard, because you're going to be able to pick up the pin if you have really tight hamstrings. If you can't flex through your spine, you're going to figure out a way to do it. But it's going to be eventually that day that you're going to have something pop up and be like, what the heck happened? And it's like, well, unfortunately, we'd have to rewind this years and years, and like here's where you're missing, and here's the mobility thing. So I love this conversation. Yeah.
I don't know if you caught it last week, but Dr. Seaman had said deep down, the general population does not want to be active. They don't want to exercise, and they don't want to eat the right foods. I'm just going to say that. What goes through your head? Because I'll tell you my part real quick was I don't think I think about that. So when he said that, it hit way harder than it should have. That deep down, these are two things which are essential to quality of life, right? Because remember, the body requires three things, right? That we talked about earlier. That's what like the subconscious needs to occur. But outside of those three, the hierarchy of needs gets a little smaller. But when it comes to quality of life, these are two things that if we're aiming to live to age 100, to do the best that we can to dodge cancers, etc., and use the best information we know in health, these things really matter. The foods we eat, not having these blood markers that are bad, that things that we can absolutely measure in a real physical, etc. The foods we eat and activities that we do. These things we know if we could bottle up exercise, put it in a pill, it'd be the best medication ever made. And Pfizer and all the other companies would be fighting over the rights for this drug, and it would never go generic, right? I mean, it would be the best thing. We know that. But then David comes in last week and crushes my soul and says, people don't want to do this shit, Jason. They don't care about either one of these. So then I just sat there and just balled up and was like, I don't accept that. But it's probably true, but I don't know. Where are you at?
So I'm just going to say it. Like, suck it up, Buttercup. I don't know what other to say it. It's just you're right. Like, for the most part, you could live, eat Twinkies every day, get up, go to your job, come home, sit on the couch, watch TV. But it's like, if you just want to live that crappy of a life, you will eventually crash and burn from that. You will not be able to feel a lot of the feelings. You will not be able to express yourself the way that you can. And it's just, there's just many levels to the game. And it's like, I just don't want to settle for level 1 when there's a level 10. I would much rather, kind of like he said, go out on my own, doing what I want to do, rather than like get to this spot where I'm having people to help me. I'm having to take medications, I'm limiting myself. So it's definitely a hard question. And that was a big thing, is somehow finding the motivation, having that Whoville moment of like, man, this is what I want to do. I've had this conversation in the past month with a lot of patients. It's just that motivation. It's like, well, Dr. Ethan, I'm just not motivated to do it. It's like, dang it, throw the motivation out the door. It's fleeting. It's up and down. It does. That's not what you should rely on. You should rely on you knowing deep down that this is just what you have to do. You have to work hard. It stinks. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I would much rather eat Samoa cookies and Twinkies every night. But instead, I go for protein and vegetables. So it's not a great answer. My perspective is a little skewed because I come from such an athletic background where it's like you have to stay in that lane of like eating right, doing the right things. The discipline's got to be there. So from a very young age, that's always been a part of who I am and how I've lived. So I sometimes don't fully understand where people come from, but I kind of understand. But it's like, understanding or not, it's pretty black and white. Like, you got to do something. Here you are, you're overweight, your inflammatory markers are high, your strength is bad, your mobility is bad. It's like, it's very obvious why you're hurting. So it's black and white what you got to do. You got to get out, start walking, you got to start stretching, you got to start strength chaining. Look at that chart of the six things of life. Start working on two of the six, 4 of the 6, whatever it is. Like, we got to start getting this ball rolling in the right direction. So a little bit of a tangent, but it's hard. I don't know other than you got to have that Whoville moment of being like, this is just what I have to do. And it stinks, that discipline. You got to derive it from somewhere. So hit me with where it puts you emotionally.
It wrecked me, but what it did do was it highlighted, I heard a strength coach say one time, is that getting up and getting off your butt every day and exercising and putting in the time is really, really hard to do, but it makes life really easy. Coming home, sitting on your ass, drinking a lot, eating all your favorite foods is really easy to do, but it's going to make life really, really hard.
Yeah.
And so by summarizing those two things and putting that into perspective, you've just got to do what you said. You just got to push play. And I think the hardest part for so many people is they've been off the train so dadgum long.
Mm-hmm.
That's the killer. So if you've been off the train that long, I think that's where having a team behind you that can help you the most. And so I brought up the physical requirements for life again. It's because if we look at this list, so we have stability, you have to be mobile. Okay, you have to have the strength that you need to do the things that you want to do. It's crucial that you get your aerobic fitness up, you get your strength up, you get your anaerobic fitness. So you're sprinting, you're jogging, etc. A couple of those are cardio based, and yes, we're going to train those. But if you had to say of the 6, there's 4 that we are massive experts in at Active Spine and Joint Center, and it's going to be the mobility, the strength. It's going to absolutely be the stability piece, and it's going to be getting these things back to where they need to be. We can coach you right through that and hand you off to where you're ready to program all of those other things. I mean, how often do we send somebody outside to do sprints or do distance around the church parking lot? Because we happen to have that across the street. That is such a beautiful thing that's right near us for them, that when it's the appropriate time of year, if they're a runner, we're going to run them. We're going to have them do those sprints. We're going to do whatever. So we can hit all 6 of those aspects and make sure to get them cohesive so that we can hand them off. They graduate at the end. We hit them with the confetti gun. They're out of there, and then they're self-managing, and we follow up just on a wellness basis, spreading them further and further out, 1 month, and now it's 2 months, now it's 6 months out, et cetera, and making sure they're hitting their markers. But sometimes you just need to get out of that rut, and you need to give that up and it not be you trying to self-motivate, because self-motivation is impossible. I would say the older we get, the more we have more conversations in our head that are just reinventing the wheel and coming up with a million judgmental reasons in front of our shampoo containers in the shower about like why we shouldn't do something, or why we feel like crap, or why we're doing X, Y, or Z, or why we deserve to be this way and self-punish. All of that is such crap. Like, throw that out. You get one turn at this thing. And if you've got kids or grandkids coming, I mean, how emotional was that video that we shared? And we're going to reshare again tomorrow about watching that elderly gentleman kick ass with kettlebells and then realize, why is he doing that? He's doing that because he knows the requirement. What he wants to do more than anything is have his granddaughter be able to put the star on the tree. That's life. He gets up and he trains, but he's able to take a marker and say, this is why I'm doing this. That he's putting that goal there because he's goal oriented. If you're not goal oriented at all, that's okay. You get up and you hate the workout, but you get it in anyway.
That's it. And I think that just ends up building momentum. At first, you're going to hate it. It might be the first week. It might be the second week. It might be the third week. It might be the fourth week. But eventually you'll be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm making the right steps. And then that's when it flips. That's when it's like, don't get me wrong. There's some days I have to I'm sitting on the couch. I'm watching a little Sports Center before jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, I'm not going. And then at that last second, I'm like, get up and go. And it's like, you just have to do it. It's like, no matter what, you just got to get up and do it. And it's those little wins that are going to get you to where you be. And I think this goes back to finding that why. Is sometimes life is hard, where you're waking up at 7, you're getting the kids out the door, you're doing your own thing all day long, you're getting home, you're cooking breakfast, you're putting the kids to bed, you're passing out, and you're doing it all over again. Sometimes I think some people just need to sit down for that 15 minutes, like, hold on, what the heck is going on here? Where's my life at? Where does my life need to be, want to be? Like, how do I make those changes once again? Like, where am I at? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? And that's where you have to ask yourself. But sometimes that cycle of life, that fast turning wheel, that train that's flying by life can just bog you down. And so that's where my mind always falls back to, is just, where do you want to be? Get there, do the right steps. And sometimes those steps are not fun, but it's those little wins every day that are going to get you there. You just got to get out of the rut.
Yeah. Both of us were very, very fortunate that we went, in my biased opinion, the top chiropractic school in the country, but no doubt it's one of the top 2. The reality is that we had one of the all-time great biochemistry and professors. And one of the things that I always thought that was so impressive that he taught was that when he went through the biochemistry of the body and the processes and how they function, one of the things that he led to is that reality-wise, up to about 25, the process in the body are made so that we can treat ourselves pretty miserably and we can still be okay. So yeah, we may feel a little crappier, we may feel a little sluggish, but up to about 25, the decisions we make, we really don't have a ton of consequences for. But after 25, we pretty much lose that. And after we get to 45, the game is changed. And so the reality is you have to jump in there, be aggressive, and stimulate that process. You have to look at exercise as the stimulus that is going to build health over the next 72 hours. And so I loved, like you said the phrase, suck it up, buttercup. To quote the late, great Barbara Hughes, my great, incredible grandmother, one of the most ruthless women I've ever met, she would say, tough titty, says the kitty, but the milk's still good. Get your ass in there and go to karate. That's what she would tell me. Yeah. She would say that. I'm like, I don't want to go. I'd rather stay home and play Mario. And she was like, tough titty, says the kitty. She'd hit us with it so fast. We even knew it was coming. We could say it before she could say it, but we knew like, oh God, that means she's not going to break. So we got to go. But then what happens is that there's phases, right? So at first you get excited about it. You love it. You start to feel better. You see the scale go down. You're in. And then that plateaus. Honeymoon phase is over. So now you're like, I got to go. So you go, but if you're not training effing hard, you don't get that next level stimulus, but you can maintain health. So the hard part for people is they don't necessarily see the decline that's coming. They can't see the future 5 years from now. So if they could, it would change everything. But humans don't have that amazing power. So you have to understand, if you're in okay shape, if you walk up to the wall, nose hits before your belly, blood pressure's good, you get your physical, your blood markers are good, and you're exercising 300 minutes a week. Okay, great. Keep doing what you're doing. You may not love it, but suck it up and keep going. It's doing right. You're maintaining. But if you want to make advancements and you want to gain strength and keep giving the body a reason to be healthier, you've got to stimulate it. You have to give it the stimulus. What stimulus are you going to give it to make it be healthier? There's no benefit in putting on muscle mass. That's so hard for people to understand. A lot of women will think that I don't know why this is still stigma, but it is. Saw somebody do a poll recently. 70% still thought that if they started doing any resistance training, that they would look bulky, masculine, and they would look terrible. And that is absolutely the biggest fallacy that needs to be broken right away for females, is that lifting heavy weights is going to make you look masculine. I promise you, you do not have enough time or dedication, and you do not have the time or the recoverability to put on mass to a high level like some of these elite bodybuilders. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you have other things in your life that you value, and it's not just training and eating 8 hours a day. So the reality is that's not going to happen, but you're going to get that tone, that girlish figure that you're wanting by lifting heavy and doing the right things. But if you don't have the confidence with it, we can either walk you through as a medical team, or we can help find you a trainer locally that's going to help plug you in and build you up, right? I think one of our favorite things to do in our community, there's several places that we refer to, but my gosh, I mean, we do the handoff we try to pump everybody towards Alan Bickmer all the time, because what's Alan do?
Cheers to Alan Bickmer. Cheers to Alan Bickmer.
Cheers, Alan. Because we know he's going to have a well-rounded understanding of the strength side. He's had injuries in the past, just like anybody else, but he's works his butt off, strength trains, and he also practices what he preaches, right? He's someone local that's going to go kill it and go do the right thing. And there's other gyms also, but a lot of times people just aren't going to be ready to walk into the gym and have that confidence. And that's where, in a medical environment where we have all the gym equipment in the world, we can hand walk you through that and make sure you leave there ready to go. But even local places, I mean, like Workout Anytime, et cetera, they have the equipment where what we just did, they can go walk over there, and for an inexpensive amount per month, they can go crush it.
Yeah, that's always, it's frustrating and good at the same time. Like, they get to that end of the care plan, and I've seen them go from level 1 to level 7. And it's like, you've gained all this knowledge, you've gained all this strength. Like, I need you to keep it rolling, Dr. Ethan. But what do I need to go do? It's like, the past month, I promise, like, all you got to do is repeat these exercises. But don't get me wrong, that's where a person like Alan Bickmer and, Stephanie Raven over at the First Baptist Gym can help people trudge along and do that. And I think finding the right gym is a really good answer. I've struggled with that over the past year here in Nashville, finding the correct jiu-jitsu gym for me. Everybody is going to have an environment that they kind of fall toward and say, hey, this feels safe to me, falling back to what you said earlier. Like, I feel comfortable here. some people like Gold's Gym. Some people want to show their biceps. Some people want to grunt and groan and do all those things at a gym. There's some people that they want to walk in, they want to do their cardio, they want to do a little bit of lifting and get the heck out of there nice peacefully. And that's another gym. Nowadays, with all the resources that we have, you just got to try it out. You got to bounce around for a little bit, go into a gym and say, hey, I'm just trying out. I don't want to commit to anything right now. Let me do a week, 2 weeks or whatever. Here it is. Get in there, try out what you want to try out, and just try to kind of see, is this the gym for me? Do I feel comfortable here? Can I walk in, do what I need to do, and walk out? Because not every gym is created the same, and they shouldn't be. There's just different levels that one of people get to. There's just different things that people like. Loud music, not loud music, big, scary free weights, just motion systems. It's just whatever you walk into and say, hey, I like this, and it should be kind of that instant, like, this feels nice to me. I like this. And I think that's a big thing. That's a sustainable habit. That's a big thing that we talk about with people, of the overuse injuries, too fast, too soon. But it's also like, hey, if a gym, every time you walk in, you get anxiety, you start getting heart racing, and you jump on a piece of equipment, you get it done, get out. It's like, that's not sustainable either. We want you to do something that you can get up in early in the morning, or you can go to work, or you can go to the gym after work and feel like you can get that in and go home to your family. Like, it's whatever is going to create the most sustainable habits for you.
Yeah. And I think in our community, CrossFit Hendersonville has been probably the best thing that's ever happened to barbells in Sumner County, because now they've grown over time, way bigger facility. And they've just done such a great job with their programming and community. But at the end of the day, if you're not into barbells, we got to find something that's right for you. Yeah. And I think that's where, if you have the right medical team around you, they're going to find that for you, or we're going to be able to help you find the right person to plug you into, to meet, interact with, and then give it a shot. I think that's something that is undervalued, as well as understanding how the place that you're going to seek medical care, man, can they help plug me in to the next steps and the next handoff? And I think we know just about somebody at every possible location that you could go to, and somebody there to plug you in. So don't devalue that you've got to get after it. But if you're with the right people, they're going to know the right people. And that's where, great quality happens to interact with other great quality. So I think that's what makes that helpful. And I think it's something that is one of our proudest aspects, is that when it comes to this show, and we think about how many great medical providers that we work with all the time, that we've had the opportunity to have on here, and just to highlight some of the incredible knowledge base in our Sumner County community, that, man, I just can't think of anything that's going to walk in the clinic that we don't know the right place to plug them into. If we can't handle it, we definitely know who can. And that if they have an injury that's, too significant, or now they've graduated already and it's time for them to go get it, we can help guide them on where to be, how to get there, or even if it's to work out at home, we can guide them on the right things to be doing. And I think that can't be stated enough. But the deep down bottom line is, they've got to cope with the idea that my body is naturally going to decline unless I stimulate it to do a hell of a lot better, and give it a reason to keep having that greater quality life.
That's it. I think the big question is, for a lot of people who might be listening who aren't in Sumner County, it's like, hey, if you're in Sumner County, you know where we're at. X Spine Joint Center, we got you. Come in, let us check you out. We'll get you the right spot. If it's here, if it's somewhere else, it's fine. But you had talked about at the beginning of the show that it really is kind of a wild, wild west in the medical professional field. And even, as being in the chiropractic profession, it's like, maybe 1 out of 5 is going to be able to get you there. But if they're not in Sumner County, what should people be looking for to have that supportive medical group to help them out with, the maintenance or the acute or anything like that, where they can go in and take that responsibility off them and say, hey, these people got me. They're going to help me out. So I'm curious your thoughts, since I'm a little younger in practice, but what's a good answer for people that might be like, hey, I think I've had this back pain. Wait, it's not normal. Like, I'm listening to you guys. This is awesome. Let me go try to change it. What should I look for if they're not in Sumner County?
I think step one is in the musculoskeletal field, you've got to find your first line of defense is, I'm going to go on the functional movement website. So functional movement systems, go under look for provider and find somebody that is certified in the SFMA. So the selective functional movement assessment. The reason we're biased towards that is the global 30,000 foot view of assessing every part of your body, top to bottom, head to toe. And I'm biased because I'm an instructor for them, but it was because we helped pioneer putting on video the functional assessment. And we've been doing that now since literally the day that iPad 2 came out with a camera on it, because we finally had a way to be able to do it efficiently. Actually started about a year and a half before that with just an old physical camera that was impossible to handle. It was a nightmare.
Like one of these?
Yeah, it was awful, man. It was so awful. But the reality is you have to find somebody that can look at it globally and seeks continuing education far beyond just getting through school. It has to be their passion. So if they don't have training where we at least know they've checked that box, I think it makes it really challenging, because at least we know that they're seeking high level interventions, multidisciplinary, meaning if you just look at the advisory board for the SFMA, there's literally no profession that's not ticked. And the top of every single profession is on that advisory board that has been consulted. Top people at Vanderbilt, at Belmont, at Knoxville. Like that's 3 schools that are literally in Tennessee, but this is a nationwide company. But the reality is they sought out the experts in certain fields, whether it's neurology or physical therapy or chiropractic. You name all of those, bring them together. We have consensus on the most thorough musculoskeletal exam at this point, and it leads you down the algorithm to not miss something. Because that's the big thing. You don't want your provider missing something or being very myopic, meaning they're coming in looking for this thing titled the chiropractic subluxation, so that's all they look for, right? Or you don't want somebody that comes in and all they do is knee rehab, so they're looking for a knee problem, right? You don't want that. You don't want anybody that's myopic. You want somebody that can get a real global, thorough view, and then now they can follow it step by step and figure out what's going on. So that would be my biased first thing to step to. I think the hardest part is that if you are seeking your primary care to ask them, I think that's a really good choice if they know all the providers locally. The hardest part is that they are specialists now in managing chronic illness for the most part, because that's how the system has forced them, not because they've chosen that. If you're a direct primary care, it seems like that's more what primary care is designed to be. But primary care, for the most part, is managing chronic disease or chronic illness. And then sometimes they get to see people in their 30s that are seeking their physical regularly, but they're dealing with some issue that's just not going to go away. So that's something that they're going to have to cope with, and they need pharmaceutical help to help maintain a quality of life. And we can use modern medicine to do that. And so it's hard for them to sometimes be able to help with some of these aspects. And if you go all the way straight ortho, I think you're jumping all the way to a specialist in surgery. That's really hard for them to be great at triage either. I mean, they may have in-house PT, or they say, hey, just find a PT or chiro that you trust, but it's hard for them to know all the nuance. So I think you really got to start, what's the true portal of entry when it comes to pain or muscle, joint, nerve, tendon? And that's going to be somebody on that SFMA list or that functionalmovement.com list, because you know you're getting all the different disciplines. There's MDs on there, there's DOs, there's chiros, there's PTs, and all of them come together and use the same research base to understand how to assess somebody. So that's where I would start, and I think that that's where everybody should look to first. And if they can't find someone from there, they're just going to have to reach out, and we try to help them tease out their local community. That is a benefit of us being part of R2P, of being, some of these things in our niche business, knowing the elite nerds, because at the top, everybody pretty much knows each other. So we can typically plug someone in wherever we need to and help make sure they get the care they need.
Yes, I love that. I love that, because it can be confusing, and hopefully, we're doing what we can. I know you're on the front lines trying to push this thing forward, but it's still just kind of a chaotic world out there.
Still hard, man. Yep, it's a hard thing. It takes a long time to turn the Titanic around, and sometimes it takes generations, but I think we're onto it. Man, I can't wait to have you on next. We have about 20 more topics I've written down in front of me that we didn't get to. But man, we covered so many great things, and I think it was just great to get a couple of things off our heart that we were feeling that I think people need to understand. And there were several questions we didn't get time to get to, but we'll make sure that next time we're there. But everybody, thanks so much. Another night at the bar. Ethan, cheers, brother.
Suck
Merry
it
Christmas.
up, Buttercup. Get it done.
See ya.
All right.